Good. Right. Well, welcome everybody. We're really pleased. This is the session about nature's calling. I'm very pleased to have here Kirsty Branning from Oakbank, who we've been working with, and Nick Down, who is the manager at Yattendon Estate in Berkshire, and so one of the farmers, and a brave man that he is. And so what we're going to get is about sort of 5-10 minutes from both, firstly Nick and then Kirsty, about some of the work they've been doing. I'm then going to do a sort of a quick Q&A with them, but then how many have we got here? We've got 20. Do put questions in the chat, and also you should be able to put your hand up, she said. Yes, you can raise your hand. If you go into participants, you can then also raise your hands if you want to ask a question. So, Kirsty, can I ask you to now share your screen so Nick can kick off on this? Brilliant. Hopefully everyone can see that. Excellent. Good. And Ben Pike, who's working with Corteva and ourselves on this project, is recording as well. So, Nick, over to you.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. As Caroline mentioned, I'm Nick. I'm the farm manager for Yattendon Estates in West Berkshire, just close to the M4 and the A34 intersection. We're, in terms of scale, we're a fairly large scale estate, just over 3,200 hectares in total, of which arable cropping wise, we are just shy of 2,000 hectares of combinable crops. We have a large area of commercial woodland, and also we grow Christmas trees, so we've had a fairly manic 4 weeks, supplying somewhere in the region of about 80,000 Christmas trees to wholesales and local buyers in the West Berkshire area. We also have some permanent pasture. We're an ex-dairy farm, so we have some old pasture that's left over from our dairying days, and sort of grazing that around the main park of the estate. We have a small herd of British white cattle. We also have two further tenanted farms on the fringe of the estate that are let out to other local farmers that we work reasonably closely with as well. Next slide, please. I've been waiting to say that all year. As I said, we've got a fairly large Christmas tree enterprise based on the estate. We also have a lot of property around the area that's owned by the estate, 160 let houses and cottages. We also run the village stores, which forms part of the estate and offers a service to those in our area, but also for those that come and work on the estate. We have 39 commercial and light industrial business units, with an employment role of somewhere in the region of about 330 people coming and going each day, which is obviously, we have a big effect and has an impact on what we do as a farming business. Sort of quite interestingly, we are coming up for a centenary on the estate. The estate was first put together, or start being put together in 1925. And we now have a similar employment role of about 330 on the estate now to what was originally working on the estate in 100 years ago. So our cropping is sort of based around cereals. All our crops are grown for sort of high-end markets. So all our wheat is milling wheat, both spring and winter. We go spring milling oats and spring milling wheat as well. And our break crops are generally chosen on local market opportunities, the soil type they're grown on, and very much on other issues, soil type that affects. We're not growers of oilseed rape anymore. We gave up growing rape 2 or 3 years ago with the issues around flea beetle So we've sort of changed that over the last few years. Again, we have some sort of temporary grass and some maize that we grow with one of our tenanted farms. And also just to control grass weeds, we're using sort of winter fallow and spring cover crops to sort of control blackgrass during the winter, but sort of increase biodiversity and improve soil health throughout the spring. So I've been here for 4 years. I came here 4 years ago. We were growing 3 crops at that stage. Now we're up to 9 or 10. So an indication of how we're trying to change things to increase our approach and how we farm. Next slide. So the estate is sort of based on the edge of the North Wessex Downs, the Marlborough Downs to the north, and then the south we are on the Thames Valley Basin. So quite a big, diverse landscape, very, very different from one end to the other of the estate. Generally to the north, we are, more sort of undulating downland chalk soils, and then to the south, along the Thames Basin, we have the River Pang running. So Marlow series, sandy loams, very free draining, but quick to dry out in the summer. And then the central part of the estate is much higher clay content, high levels of flint, which makes our working practices sort of slightly tricky, hard wearing, small fields, irregular fields, lots of shading surrounded by woodlands. But again, in terms, lots of opportunities to link up habitats in between our cropping. Our altitude ranges from sort of 230 feet in the lower part of the estate to just over 600 on the highest points up on the downs, and our average rainfall sort of sits around 700 millimetres based over the last 75 years. I think we're up to about 920 now for 2020. So as I said, some of our soils are challenging. This is, a lot of our estate looks like this, very high levels of flint, hard wearing on machinery. Any generally moving parts tend to suffer with sort of these levels of stone. So again, as we look at how we establish our crops going forward, this is the aspect that's the trickiest to work around. And obviously, some of our soils have got sort of 35–40% stone content. So therefore, the 60% we have left over, we need to look after to reap the rewards that we need to stay sort of financially viable. And as I said, we've got a small herd of British white cattle that graze our main parkland. And this is an area that's under sort of consideration going forward. We've obviously been livestock farmers before with a big dairy, but how can we, or one of the issues that we're looking to try and solve during the programme is, how we can further introduce livestock back into to sort of supplement our arable rotation, grazing cover crops, things like that. So that's something we're sort of looking at. We're working with a couple of neighbours at the moment, but can we take that back in hand as we work through the next sort of 3 or 4 year period. So sort of leading on to what we've been doing so far under the programme, as Alice alluded to, it's been a tricky 6 or 7 months to get started with COVID, but generally that hasn't restricted in what we've done so far. We've done some work on our soils and looking at our soil health with Ian Robertson. We've done a lot of work on sort of bringing our staff into include in that as well, and also some speak out training in how we are promoting what we're doing as a farming business. We've done the speak out training, and we've also done some work looking at the LEAF Sustainable Review, and also working towards LEAF Mark, which we're hopefully going to achieve sometime during 2021.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think we've got, thank you very much for that. I don't know if there are any sort of questions of clarification before I pass over to Kirsty. Nope. Okay, Kirsty, do you want to reshare the screen? And then if you can talk about some of the work that you've been doing. Also, I'd just like to introduce as well Ian Gould from Oakbank. Ian, if you can just kind of wave to everybody as well, that would be great. Thank you. So we love working with Oakbank as well.
All right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to just, Caroline, can you give me a thumbs up just to check you can see what you're expecting to see on the screen, and can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Marvellous, thank you. For those of you who haven't come across us before, Oakbank Game and Conservation we're specialists in giving advice on creating and managing habitats on farmland, and we're also suppliers of appropriate seed and plants. My role in terms of the Resilient and Ready programme was to work with Nick and also with Andy Basin to develop environment plan, a habitat plan for their sites, really. The idea is to identify what's already there, and also to identify opportunities for them to enhance the farm's offer for wildlife in ways that are sensible. So I'm just going to talk you through how we approach that in general terms, and a little bit about the sorts of things that we've spotted out that, for the sites to think about going forwards. So what I love about making a habitat plan is you get to identify things and celebrate them with the farmer. And I think a lot of the time, many farmers already have a really good idea about the wildlife on their farm, but it's always really wonderful to spot something that they didn't know was there, like that little ivy bee in the top right hand corner there, which is quite a newcomer to this country, and it's a really sweet little bee. And I just love being able to celebrate the wildlife that is on people's doorsteps, really, and they might not appreciate. So I think having a habitat plan is a really great way of doing that. It should also identify where there might be some environmental issues, things that are a bit of a problem at the moment, as well as some risks, things that could become a problem in the future. Really spot those out and identify some potential solutions for those things. And it's a really collaborative effort. It's a way of developing those potential opportunities and enhancements together. And I think that collaborative angle is really important for it to be successful. And as with so much in life, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. So just forcing yourself to kind of review what you've got and identify what's important, I think is a really useful step, particularly when we're, as Caroline said at the beginning, we're entering such a period of change. So for Yattendon, it's a very large site, as Nick has highlighted. In terms of the environment, one of the key features is any sites that are designated, whether that's an international designation, such as an SAC or SPA, or national designations. On Yattendon, there's a SSSI. You can see the wood there. The red hatching is a site of special scientific interest. And there's quite a few scheduled ancient monuments around as well, such as the little orange dot you can just see towards the left-hand side of the map there, which is a little tumulus. So we can identify what's there, what condition it is, what are the important features that it's been designated for, and make sure we include those. We can also look and see what priority habitats have already been identified. In the case of Yattendon, for example, there's quite a lot of the wood pasture and parkland around. And Nick showed his beautiful cattle in the parkland there, which are really important. There's quite a few little traditional orchards around as well in the area, although they're often associated with the village rather than the farmland per se. And there's a lot of woodland, much of which is ancient and semi-natural. And again, there are data sets out there that we can just draw on that have identified these features already. But we do need to ground truth them as well, because they're not 100% foolproof. Obviously, our environment is changing all the time, and we do often find areas that are priority habitat that haven't been identified and mapped as such to date. Species records, again, we're not starting from a blank sheet here. We're pulling together information that's already existing to begin with. So there's lots of places we can find records of species, be it local record centres, bird atlases, National Biodiversity Network Atlas is a really rich source of information. In the case of Yattendon, I think we found a couple of 1 kilometre squares that were part of a long-term butterfly monitoring scheme. And they had hundreds of butterfly records, but only for those parts of the estate. It's worth saying that in my experience, a lot of farmland has been under-recorded. So just because something hasn't been recorded there in the past doesn't mean that it's not there. So it's useful to pull together what we do know, but you can't beat a good bit of field work for actually working out what is there and talking to the farm and the staff on the ground to see what they know about as well. We do take into consideration those local landscape aspects that Nick was saying. Yattendon is very varied. It overlaps with 2 of those national character areas, and it falls within the area of outstanding national beauty for the North Wessex Downs, which again, has strategic objectives for what's important to that landscape. So we are making sure that the recommendations we're coming up with are in line with those national and local priorities. The environment plan doesn't go into historic features too much, but they are an important consideration. So we do look to see not only what is scheduled, but in the case of West Berkshire, there's a really accessible resource of other non-designated historic features that we can show. And we also tend to look back at the historic maps, typically going back to the sort of 1880s, and just compare what's changed. We're not necessarily advocating going back to those systems, but it does give an interesting angle when you're thinking about what might be possible going back into the looking to the future. So we do take a bit of a look from all different angles. Lastly, we look at some of the natural geography of the site. Nick's already talked about some of the geology in the soils, the fact that there's a lot of slopes around in Yattendon, and that affects the hydrology hugely. So again, this screenshot here from Environment Agency's modelling of surface runoff risk, actually. And you can see that it picks out the river quite clearly going north to south, but it also picks up those areas where the topography might suggest that you've got more risk of surface runoff, particularly in heavy rain events like we're getting more frequently now. So again, that can help us plan where we can perhaps put some mitigation measures and things to intercept that runoff and improve not only the water quality but the flow pattern as well. But you can't beat field work, and there are certainly a lot of fields to work at Yattendon. So when we're walking around, we're trying to identify areas like wet areas, difficult areas to work, areas where there's maybe some poaching. We'll look at the condition of the field boundaries, and we're really mapping the farm in terms of what habitats are there in a quite simple way, but it does allow you to be quantitative and to look at the condition of those habitats. Identifying species as much as possible, because I think that adds to a real richness of information for the farmer, and other kind of key features. So we're trying to get everything pulled together in a map-based system that's really easy to access. So I just pulled together a few of my favourite photographs from my fieldwork from Yattendon, whether it's a fairy flax, which is the little tiny white flower over in the left-hand corner. And this is the chalk grassland species, but actually it was still hanging on in quite a few areas of grassland in arable field corners. So that was a really lovely indicator species, through to the tiny, tiny bird's nest fungi in the top middle there, which is so small and so cool, as you can see, because they look like a little bird's nest with the tiny egg-like structures in the middle there. Through to the bottom right, you've got knapweed broom rape, which looks totally alien and is a parasitic plant on broom rape. And what we found in Yattendon, for example, was quite special. There's quite a few little areas where they've been left alone for quite a while. They weren't very productive, but they were developing into a really nice grassland scrub mosaic, and that was supporting all sorts of flowers like the yellow fleabane there, quite a few moth species like the burnet companion and the mother Shipton moth. And it was just really good to kind of identify those and highlight them, so they can go, actually, these are quite special. So what you get at the end of all of that field work is a map that we pulled together showing all the different habitats on the estate, where they are and how much of it there are. And I do tend to kind of annotate that with extra species information, so you can kind of see which are the really rich areas already and where some of that connectivity is. And then you're looking at identifying opportunities for the farm where they might be able to enhance, let's say, their offer for wildlife. And in the case of Yattendon, for example, there's lots of existing grassland corners and strips that were really nice, but with the right management, they could be improved and turned back into something more akin to chalk grassland, using a much wider range of species, native provenance. So there are definite opportunities there. There are opportunities in some areas to reduce runoff, and a lot of that can be done through simply improving the soil structure and its infiltration rate, which I know Nick's really keen to work on. But equally, we can use hedgerow restoration to intercept some of these key areas, strategic use of buffer strips, even new woodland belts, all possible ways that we can manage some of that. And through to enhancing some of the arable lands offer for wildlife, both rebuilding soil health, so thinking about the biodiversity actually within the soil, and also identifying some of those potentially challenging areas to work and putting them back into wildlife habitats, so you're actually getting a lot of wildlife from a relatively small area. And for example, this was a corner underneath some wires that was a bit tricky with very big kit, so that would be a really interesting opportunity to look at. And what you end up with there is another second map of opportunities that the farm could consider in the future. What we tend to do is prioritise those as well. So what I did for Nick was identify a few key areas of the estate where there was a lot of potential opportunity, and things to look at first, perhaps. So I think change isn't just coming, is it? It's already here, and I think what something like a habitat plan allows you to do is a real good opportunity just to sit back and identify what we've got, think things through. And I think the Resilient and Ready programme is a really great opportunity for the farmers to do that in a way that perhaps they wouldn't feel they had the time or resources to do otherwise. So it's been really great to take part, and I think we've got a little bit of capacity as well to work with Andy and Nick going forwards to kind of help them on that journey. So thank you, Caroline. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and I'm going to go back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Kirsty. And wow, gosh, thank you both, Nick and Kirsty. I mean, Nick, you must be sort of almost thinking, I daren't tread on some of this sort of valuable habitat as it sort of starts to be uncovered more and more. What have you really learned as sort of the first stages from getting involved in this?
I think, I was sort of, truly amazed at when the results started coming back from sort of Kirsty's field walking, exactly what we had found, which gave us a fantastic building block to work with. It's come at the perfect timing for us in that we've got a countryside stewardship application in at the moment, due to hopefully start on the 1st of January. So, it's given us some fantastic starting points where we can really focus on areas moving forward. Obviously, as we've said, the scale is huge, and it can become a bit of an untamed beast. So it's really given us some nice starting points that we can start to work on, hopefully from day one.
Brilliant. And as Kirsty has said, it's not just sort of about the natural habitat, it's also about the soil biodiversity as well. So I mean, this whole programme has probably put a good framework for that together. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, definitely. And I think, soil health has been a real buzzword for the last few years. And, as we see sort of elms and the transition unravel, that forms a huge part of what we're likely to be looking at going forward. So, any ways we can influence and learn as we go forward, is going to be invaluable to us as a business, but also the wider industry as well.
No, thank you for that. So, George, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? I think hopefully you can unmute yourself. Can you?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I've got another question as well, but just
okay, ask them both. That's fine.
Yeah, the initial question was just struck me about the size of the estate and the habitats, that the diversity of habitats that Nick has got, which is wonderful to see. I just wondered about how important it is and how challenging it is to create connectivity between the habitats. And the subsidiary question to that is, so what are the nature objectives in the sort of 3-year plan? Where do we want the estate to get to in terms of habitat and species? And maybe that's related to the connectivity between the habitats as well, actually.
So Nick, do you want to kick off from the practical perspective for kind of driving that connectivity, and then Kirsty, if we can come on to you as well?
I think one of the big learnings for me very early on when I came here, when we were still growing oilseed rape, and we sort of looked at all sort of different sorts of sort of cultural controls, you know, when we started to study aerial maps where we had issues in oilseed rape with flea beetle, it was really interesting to see where we'd built up natural predators in certain areas to the northeast of woodlands and areas that were out of production. You know, the effect on the crop through beneficial insects was just huge. You know, so that was a real eye opener for me. And then we started to think about, you know, obviously we've got a lot more going on here than what we think we have. How can we expand that across the estate so, you know, we can reduce our use, particularly of insecticides? You know, so that was the big eye opener for me, you know, fairly early on. Kirsty, you want to add in there?
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right, George. I mean, connectivity is you always strive for it, don't you, in your natural systems for all sorts of very sensible reasons. And I think that's the advantage of a map-based approach, is you can prioritize those opportunities. And if you can do something one way and it gives you some connectivity, whereas another way it gives you less connectivity, then actually the advice to Nick is going to go, you're going to get a better bang for your buck if you do it over here rather than over there. And I think all of that is, you know, it's just critical, isn't it? So if anything, the challenge for Yattendon is because it is so big and it's so varied, it's not just about connectivity like for like, but actually we're thinking about how can we connect this bit of, for example, parkland that you saw there with perhaps some grassland reversion. So they're still semi-natural habitats, but slightly different, but we can build them together and get connectivity that way. So there's, yeah, it's a fun challenge to have.
And from your perspective, Nick, with George's second question, you know, what for you would good look like in 3 years? And 3 years is quite a short time scale, really, from an environmental perspective. But I guess so also do a 10-year, 50-year.
I think it is 3 years is a short period, and I think as we've seen, and you know, and someone has said to me over the last 12 months, you know, occurrence is good, abundance is a whole lot better, and I think, you know, that must be what we aim for. You know, we know we've got some interesting things here. It's how we can, you know, build on those, get those areas spreading wider across the estate. You know, to improve the longevity, you know, and the prospects for what we have got here. So I think, you know, that leads back to the connectivity as well, as how we can, you know, start to join things together so we can create better habitat, more widespread habitat. You know, and that will also feed into the work we do with our neighbours on you know, in the early stages of a cluster group as well. So it's not only what we can do here, it's how we can also join with the wider community as well. I think how we set targets for that, I think really, you know, the world is our oyster at the moment, really. You know, we've obviously got some changes in policy coming our way that's going to help us, you know, along the way with that. So you know, I think the more we can do, the better.
I think that's a critical point, is, you know, the government have challenged us all with co-design, and the more that we can actually say, right, co-design means we do it together, and if there are these nuggets of opportunity, we really should be informing government about that. Kirsty, what for you would this you know, is there an iconic species that you haven't quite seen yet, but you know might be there somewhere in these wonderful downlands?
I think for me, yes, we know there are some special species on Yattendon. The one thing I was hoping to look out for is obviously on the northern part of the estate, where Nick said you've got the chalky soils. There's potential there for some really rare arable plants, but you've got to look at them at the right time of year and know what you're looking for as well. So taking a snapshot through this programme is a great snapshot, but it is just a snapshot in time. You can't expect to pick up everything, but what you can do is say, look, I think there's potential for this to be here, but you need to go away and pull in some extra resource to really confirm it, to pull in some resource and to perhaps monitor. So we can flag those things up, and that's part of just kind of assessing your report, is kind of what might you be missing, what are you really confident about.
And Nick, I guess this programme, the Resilience and Ready programme, has kind of hopefully helped give you a bit of confidence. And how's your identification coming on rare species and that wonderful fungus, that bird nest fungus and things like that?
Yeah, I think that, it's come at a perfect time for us, really. For me personally, I'd been here for 3 years. I'd got used to the sort of basics of the business, and it was the time to sort of crack on and start looking at the wider peripheries of the estate and how we can influence what's going on there. So I think it's been perfect timing for us, on the estate, but also with the changes that are coming our way, and ultimately the different mindset we're going to have to approach our business with.
Yeah, no, that's so. I mean, you mentioned about the cluster group, and I know, Ian, you're obviously on the here as well. I mean, you've been doing a lot of work in this area, and about the importance of collaboration across landscapes too. Ian Gould is from Oakbank as well.
Yeah, very much so, Caroline. And I would say that the cluster group approach has been almost universally, a fantastic opportunity for the people involved, from just feeling like they're a bit more supported by their local network. And actually, you uncover some real gems, and they don't necessarily need to be the obvious people. It might be, a farm worker on the place, might be, a beekeeper or something like that, and you've got that skill at hand. It hasn't got to travel, it hasn't got to come far. And actually, one of the best things that we've seen is it's the person you want to impress most is your farming neighbour. And so it's a bit of keeping up with the Joneses, and actually it pulls everyone up, it pulls their socks up, they pay a little bit more attention, and the delivery standard goes up everywhere. We've noticed that, routinely. But one of the biggest things, which was a bit of a surprise, was just the social element of it. And a lot of people are talking about things like mental health, but having this support network, if you're not really sure, and a lot of time farmers quite understandably are a bit anxious about asking officialdom for an opinion on something. It doesn't have to be, they might know the rules, because the rules might be written down in their paperwork. It's just an opinion on what it really means. And you'll find within a cluster you get one person who's a real rules guy who's read every detail, and another person who's a bit more practical, another person who's really into the biodiversity, another one who's really into perhaps forestry, and that range of things. And having that network and just support at hand that you can get hold of has been a real success. And
that is, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's such a key part, is that whole area of collaboration is a very core area. I'm very conscious we're about to be kicked out quite quickly. But Paul, I think you've got a question. Is it a quickie?
Well, firstly, I just wanted to thank Kirsty for her presentation and say it's almost exactly what I would do for a leaf mark plan. So the first question would be, how different is the Resilient and Ready farm from a leaf mark farm or a demonstration farm? And the second one is, and I think you're kind of answering it in a way, is what I'm doing. I'm really, really now trying to push that natural capital angle and look ahead to how this farm I'm working for would attach itself to the ELMS scheme in the future. Is that what you're really trying to do here?
So we will get kicked out in 7 seconds. The answer is yes, they're on the journey to become leaf mark and demonstration farm. And the second part of the question, I don't know whether, Nick, you can fire very quickly in 55 seconds.
Probably not in 5 seconds, but I think we're well on the journey, and that's our ultimate aim, is to get to that point, and the sooner we can get there, the better.